My name is Marissa Carter, and this story took place a little over a year ago, but it still lingers in my mind like it just happened yesterday. I've always lived a relatively quiet life. My husband Derek and I settled down in a peaceful neighborhood in Oregon, where we're raising our teenage daughter Lena. I've never been one for drama or excitement, and I certainly never thought something so unsettling would ever come into our lives. But sometimes, life surprises you in the most unexpected ways. It started with a phone call from my older sister, Camille. She had recently taken a new job that required her to work long hours in the evenings. Her husband, Daniel, had passed away in a tragic car accident just over a year before, and it had left Camille as a single mom to their 14-year-old son, Aiden. She'd managed to keep it together, but she admitted she was exhausted, mentally and physically. "I hate asking this," she said over the phone. "But could you come stay for a few days? Just help Aiden with dinners and keep him company in the evenings? I'm worried he's spending too much time alone." Of course, I said yes. I've always been close to Aiden. He was a sweet kid, soft-spoken and thoughtful, and after everything he'd been through, I couldn't bear the thought of him feeling isolated. So I packed a small suitcase and drove the hour and a half to Camille's place the following weekend. Camille's house was just as I remembered it. Modest, warm, with pictures of Daniel still hanging in the living room. His absence was noticeable. The silence in the house felt heavier than I remembered. Aiden greeted me with a quiet smile, and we spent the first evening catching up. We made homemade pizzas, watched an old comedy on TV, and talked about school and video games. Everything seemed normal, maybe even a little too normal. The next day was a Sunday, and Camille had to leave by 3 p.m. for a night shift. Aiden and I played cards after dinner and laughed more than I expected. I was relieved to see he still had that spark in him. But later that night, something happened that changed everything. It was around 9:30 p.m. when Aiden knocked on the door of the guest room I was staying in. "Aunt Marissa?" he said softly. "Can I ask you for a favor?" "Of course," I replied. "What's up?" He walked in, looking sheepish and slightly embarrassed. "My shoulders have been killing me since gym class. Coach had us doing this crazy push-up routine. Do you think you could help me out? Just a quick massage or something." I hesitated for a second, but only because I wasn't sure I'd be any good at it. Still, it seemed harmless enough. "Sure, kiddo. Sit on the floor in front of me." He sat down and I started gently working on his shoulders. He was tense, but not just physically. His whole body seemed stiff, like he was carrying more than just sore muscles. We made light conversation, school, his favorite video games, the latest movie he wanted to watch. Then, just as I was getting ready to stop, he asked something that made me pause. "Aunt Marissa, can I ask you something weird?" "Of course," I said. "You know you can tell me anything." He took a deep breath and lowered his voice. "Do you believe in ghosts?" I blinked. "Ghosts?" He nodded, still facing away from me. "I know it sounds stupid, but since Dad died, I feel like something's been watching me. Sometimes I hear whispers. Sometimes I see shadows in my room, like someone's standing there, but when I turn the lights on, nothing's there." I didn't know what to say right away. I'm not someone who automatically jumps to the supernatural, but I also knew kids sometimes process trauma in strange ways. Still, there was something in his voice, an edge of fear that felt too real to dismiss. "That must be really scary," I said gently. "Have you talked to your mom about it?" He hesitated before replying. "I tried. A few times. But she says it's just nightmares. That I'm imagining things because I miss Dad." I sighed. Well, sometimes grief does make our brains play tricks on us. But if you're feeling scared, it's important to talk about it. There was a long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, he asked, "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" I stopped massaging and looked down at him. His voice trembled, and when he turned to face me, his eyes were wide, full of something deeper than fear. This wasn't just a kid trying to avoid sleeping alone. "Why, honey?" I asked. He leaned closer, like he was afraid of being overheard. "Because the thing that talks to me, it said if I told anyone it would hurt you next." I froze. My skin went cold, and my heart began to race. Every instinct in me screamed to take him seriously. Of course you can sleep in here, I said quickly. Let's set up a blanket and pillow on the floor. That night, Aiden curled up on the floor beside my bed, but I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every shift in the shadows made my nerves jump. I didn't know what we were dealing with, whether it was a mental health crisis, something supernatural, or something else entirely, but I knew this wasn't something to brush off. The next morning, I made us both pancakes, but Aiden barely touched his food. He was quiet, withdrawn, and kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected something or someone to appear. After some thought, I decided to reach out to an old college friend of mine, Rebecca. She's a licensed therapist who specializes in adolescent trauma and grief counseling. I explained the situation, trying not to sound alarmist, but she could tell I was worried. "Bring him in," she said. "I'll do an initial session. If there's something deeper going on, we'll take it from there." That afternoon, I convinced Camille to let Aiden meet with Rebecca. She was skeptical at first, brushing it off as a phase, but I insisted. Something inside me told me this was more serious than either of us wanted to believe. The session lasted over an hour. When Aiden came out, he looked calmer, but still withdrawn. Rebecca pulled me aside afterward and said something I'll never forget. "Marissa, he's not making any of this up. He's truly scared. But it's not ghosts he's afraid of, it's memories." I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Rebecca continued carefully. "He's experienced something deeply traumatic. I can't say exactly what yet, but it happened after Daniel's death. He's kept it buried because he didn't know how to process it. And he's been alone with those thoughts for too long." I asked the question that had been forming in the back of my mind. "Do you think someone hurt him?" Rebecca gave me a sad look. "It's possible. And if that's true, we need to make sure he's safe before we can begin the full healing process." I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. All this time, Camille thought he was just grieving. And he was. But there was more. Something had happened in that house. Something he couldn't bring himself to speak about until now. Over the next few weeks, Aiden began attending regular sessions with Rebecca. With time and trust, the truth began to emerge. It turned out that shortly after Daniel's death, a distant relative named Uncle Rob had started visiting more often. Camille had welcomed the help, not realizing the danger. Aiden had never said anything directly, just subtle signs, small changes in behavior, but no one noticed. What happened? You see in next part.